3 weeks later. 1 week later. 1 night later. 230 minutes later. The very next night, this happened. Moments later, this happened. Chapter 7, the debate. Later that day. The next day. No time later. Then at the 17th hole, this happened. 295 putts later. Meanwhile, on the set of American Stand Around Like a Bunch of Bored Snails. 2 seconds later, 4 hours later, 3 seconds later, 4 hours later, 400 thumps later, an eighth of a day later, 1 week later, 3 hours later, 2 hours of exciting football later, the same day later, hours of painful beating later, the next day, later that day, days of intensive therapy later, 6 hours later, 2 hours later, 4 hours later, 2 hours after that, several hours later, later still, come on already, is he serious? The next day, 1 hour later, the next morning, written in hieroglyphics, this happened. 32,000 sand grains later, it's like an hour. 45 minutes later, suddenly at the beginning of the episode, this happened.
Good question. Let's hear his answer.
This is a good episode. I have an idea for one where the animals race go-karts. She's being sarcastic. She knows the glue isn't nice. I'm putting her in the go-kart episode. Oh my, they'll have to think fast to get out of this one. You can keep doing that? Oh, excuse me, Mr. On-Camera Talent. Let's see if you make it into my go-kart episode. Don't worry, the farmer recovered and will soon star in my amazing go-kart episode.
I think we need a new announcer.
Too late, the end! Later, when choosing up sides for dodgeball, 3 days later, 113 voices later, 2 hours later, wait for it. The next morning, mystery was crisp in the air as the animals awoke from their restless... Oh, great, now I'm doing it. The next day, Otis was wrong. 1 hour later, 1 hour after that, 3 days later, the next day at the Missile Defense Complex, whoops, wrong show, I meant rodeo. 10 minutes later, the next day at the Pretty Lake, later that night, the animals had a Christmas party. Don't take my word for it. Look, with your eyes, now. Meanwhile, back at the story... And now back to the show. Hey, that's my line. Do I go down to where you work and do whatever it is you do? Back to the show. 10 hours of japes and shenanigans later, 2 days later...